20 Miles from a Match, Homesteading in Western Nevada, by Sarah E. Olds. Forward. The buildings are now gone, burned in the brush fires of the 1970s, and the pastures of the homestead have been absorbed by the neighboring ranch. The driving spirit of the place has moved on before that, so it was just another deserted place by then. Sarah E. Olds had gone on to other interests and finally, at 88, to her well-earned rest, having attained her goals of educating her 6 children without help from the outside and incidentally enjoying life immensely in the process. Sarah Elizabeth Thompson was born in Iowa in 1875, the youngest daughter of a family of 9. Her father, Alexander Thompson, had migrated from Scotland to Canada, where he met and married Mary Ann Harper, a recent migrant from Ireland. They soon moved to Iowa, settling on a farm near Ottumwa. The Thompsons' large family was spread over many years, so that by the time Sarah was a young lady, her older brothers and sisters were out on their own. A brother, Dave, was attracted to the mining booms of the far west, and though he returned to Iowa, his stories of adventures prodded several members of the family to move. An older sister, Nettie, committed the shameful act of divorcing her husband and went west to avoid criticism directed at herself and her family. Meanwhile, Sarah had studied dressmaking, the only acceptable occupation for ladies in the Bible Belt of the time. Late in 1890s, Sarah's parents became ill, and as the youngest daughter, she stayed home to care for them until their deaths. By 1897, Sarah was free and 21 years old. Sister Nettie, the disgraced one, was living in Modesto, California, so, in spite of dire warnings by family members still in Iowa, and the disappointment of several neighbor boys, Sarah departed for California. Nettie had made her own way by cooking and housekeeping, so she knew the mining camps of the southern Mother Lode were excellent pickings for anyone who could cook or sew. Sarah therefore set out for Sonora, an active mining camp, riding in a rockaway stage. After investigating work possibilities in Sonora, she found the best prospects were in the smaller camps near Sonora, Jamestown, Columbia, Stent. She chose Stent, 8 miles southwest of Sonora, where she met A.J. Olds, a prospector and miner. Albert J. Olds, known as A.J., was a member of a quite distinguished California family. His grandfather had come to Marin County in 1854 and bought 8,000 acres of land at Olma for, quote, 4,000 in gold coin. A.J.'s father had been a member of the Constitutional Convention for California, but A.J. and his brother were both bitten by the gold bug and had both drifted from one strike to another till their health failed. Today we know the disease as silicosis, but then it was the lethal miner's con that filled graveyards or wrecked health in camps from Bisbee to Virginia City. A record of the births of the Olds children is a record of the various mining discoveries of the period. Edson, the eldest, was born in Confidence, near Sonora, California. Jesse, in Bisbee, Arizona. Alice, in Virginia City, Nevada. By then, A.J.'s health had deteriorated so that he could no longer work underground, so the last 3 children, Leslie, Albert, and Martha, were born in Reno, where the family settled in 1906, the last one after the homestead was established. The homestead in 1910 must have been a discouraging sight. There were 3 rooms in a house of board and batten with a shed roof. Sagebrush grew to the doorstep. Cattle and horses slept next to the house for lack of fences. There was natural grass pasture and much open range. The nearest neighboring ranches were owned by absentee ranchers and operated by hired hands. So our nearest family was 12 miles away, a Mexican family whose children were about the same age as Mom Olds. All the children learned to ride at an early age, often bareback for want of a saddle, and usually on a Mustang that could be had for the breaking. The homestead was reached from Reno by following Pyramid Lake Road to 20 Mile House, then taking the old freight road which ran north toward Fish Springs and then on into Oregon. 15 miles along this road is a small valley containing 2 big ranches, and off to the east the homestead. Toole Mountain rises east of the place, with wide natural meadows and springs in the high meadow, while Dogskin Mountain, steep and barren, looms to the west. A narrow, rocky canyon connects the valley to Warm Springs, now Palomino Valley, while to the north are 2 high passes over the mountains, usually snow-closed in the winter. By 1926, all the Olds children, or homestead kids as we were sometimes called, were away from the homestead, at school or married, so Sarah, by then known as Mom Olds to the ranchers and cowboys, launched a new career. At Pyramid Lake was a fishing camp called Sutcliffe, or the Willows, one of the few privately deeded lands on the Paiute Reservation. The resort consisted of a motley array of tent houses and shacks, but it was very popular with sportsmen. Maggie Sutcliffe had died, and her husband, Uncle Jim, had no way to operate the resort, so Mom Olds leased the property for a year and then bought it in 1927. She and A.J. were excellent hosts, Mom tending to practical things and A.J. entertaining guests with stories of the mines and early days. It was here that Mom wrote the bulk of her reminiscence about homesteading. Together they had the main building replaced, and then the tents disappeared, so Sutcliffe became a thriving resort. Only hired help was Indian women for laundry and dishwashing, as the 3 younger children were home during vacations, the busiest time. We girls really worked those summers, but had fun too. Many times we would go to dances in Fernley or Flanagan, both about 20 miles away, and return just in time for a dip in the lake before serving breakfast to the fishermen. In 1927, the state legislature changed Reno's residency requirement for divorce from 6 months to 3 months, and divorcees from eastern states began crowding into Reno. There were only 2 main hotels then, the Golden and the Riverside, so the lawyers began placing clients out of town. Almost overnight, several dude ranches started, and Sutcliffe became a dude ranch as well as fishing resort. Other dude ranches near Pyramid were the Monte Cristo and the T.H., followed by ranches in Truckee Meadows and Franktown. Much to our disgust, we girls were delegated to take our dudes riding into the mountains, sometimes with hilarious results. One woman, on coming to a very steep place on the trail, declared in an elegant Bostonian accent, "I'm not going to ride down that goddamn precipice," and it took an hour of persuasion to induce her to even walk down it, with us leading her horse ahead. By 1928, A.J.'s health failed to the extent that he was bedfast for most of the time, and one more daughter was married, leaving Mom with less help in running the resort. In 1931, she sold it and moved to Reno, where A.J. died that same year. By then, Nevada was feeling the results of the Great Depression, so Mom Olds was able to buy part of the Waltz Ranch south of Reno, near what is now Virginia Lake. Here she planned to establish another dude ranch. But the winter of the Big Hungry was upon her. The Wingfield banks in Reno closed their doors, many businesses failed, and Mom's popularity became a debit, not an asset. The big Waltz house filled with unemployed cowboys and people out of work, rather than paying guests, and Mom hadn't the heart to refuse food and shelter. She leased the big house to a more hard-hearted couple and built a small house across Lakeside Drive, where the Lakeside Plaza Shopping Center now stands. Here she lived most of the time, taking occasional paying guests, traveling and revising her reminiscence about life as a homesteader. Her travels took her to Alaska, Hawaii, Mexico, and when she was 85, to Florida and New York. She remained alert and energetic to the end of her life in 1963. She was active in the Unity Church and even went on national television to tell how she got her 6 children educated. The week before her death, she won a local cribbage tournament, and bridge was a constant interest. Mom Olds' children did not fail her by accepting outside help. Her efforts to educate them may have cost Nevada, but the cost was amply repaid over the years. The boys balked at college, but the 4 girls worked and got their normal school certificates. Each taught a school a year or 2 before marrying. From the 1920s to the start of World War II, it was a crime for a female teacher to marry, so all stopped teaching and raised their families. Jessie was the first to return to teaching in rural schools, but by 1942 all 4 were back at work, and all finished university after a time out for families. In all, the old girls returned over 120 years of teaching for their initial cost of education. Edson, the trapper, continued in that line with time out for service in the Seabees during World War II. He became an excellent judge of furs, and at the time of his death was affiliated with a large New York firm of furriers, the only Gentile company in a company of Jewish businessmen. He was on a fur-buying trip to the hinterlands when he suffered a fatal heart attack at 72 years old. Albert was just out of high school when the Depression hit. He worked at various jobs in farming and mining and finally found his niche as a chippewa logger in Quincy, California, where he now lives a very active retirement. Alice was teaching in Henderson, Nevada, when she and her husband were killed in a head-on car crash. The other 3 girls are now retired, living in various parts of the state. Each produced from 2 to 4 children, all energetic, none on welfare, Mom's greatest dread. Not a bad record for a bunch of homesteader kids and a woman who started out from scratch. Leslie Olds Zerflo, Fernley, Nevada, April 1978.